Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a massive show ahead for you all. Really looking forward to the program today, where we're going to start with a fantastic interview, followed by incredibly important and substantive stories regarding the fact that, the federally subsidized unemployment benefits expired more than a month ago, but more Americans are quitting their jobs. Why? What is motivating them to do so? Some interesting data coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We'll get into that. We'll also show you just how disastrous the privatized childcare model has been, not just for families raising children, but for the economy overall. So we'll get into that as well. And later on in the second hour, John Idarola of The Damage Report will join me to discuss a January 6th rioter who decided to represent himself in court and ended up getting in a lot of trouble as a result. I'd like to say that's a fun story, although I feel a little bad for the guy. Sometimes it's not so great to have too much confidence in yourself. But before we get to all of that, I am super excited to begin the show today with an interview. Joining us now is Representative Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from the state of Minnesota, and author of This Is What America Looks Like: My Journey from Refugee to Congresswoman. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
There's so much I want to get into, but I do want to actually start off with your book and your story, because, as someone who did come to the United States as a refugee, you experienced quite a bit, especially in regard to the vetting process that's necessary to allow for refugees to come into the country. And look, as someone who came to the US as a refugee, what are your thoughts about how the United States is responding to asylum seekers at the border today, even under the Biden administration?
Yeah, I mean, my story is, as you've just mentioned, is uniquely American, right? We are used to processing people. We are used to seeing immigrants and refugees not just at our border, but arriving at our shores as well. And it's been really saddening to see that we are not holding up our ideals of welcoming immigrants with open arms. The United States is supposed to be a beacon of hope, and the current brokenness of our immigration system really is putting a dim light on that, and it's important for the administration to really re-examine what they have to do in order for us to continue to be that country that is seen as a beacon of hope, where people do run to and seek refuge.
I'm curious why you think this is happening under the Biden administration. I mean, the Trump administration was notoriously brutal when it came to the issue of immigration. And Joe Biden campaigned on decency, on really serving as the antithesis of the Trump administration. And the facts matter. I mean, when you see what happened to Nigerian asylum seekers at the border recently, it shows that, Biden tends to try to straddle, right, between appeasing the right wing and the fear mongering that they engage in, and also attempting to at least rhetorically appease progressives. What do you think is the calculation behind that?
I think it's just another reminder that things don't really change regardless of what administration we might be dealing with. And although this administration promised decency, the way that they are dealing with migrants at our border has been anything but decent. I think the reality is, obviously, the last 4 years has sort of dismantled many of the processes that we have in regards to welcoming people in our country, whether it is our refugee system or whether it is our system that allows for people to seek asylum. It seems as if we had forgotten that it is an international right for people to seek asylum. We still have a lot of the Trump era policies as part of the policies of this administration. They actually, instead of overturning it, are defending it in court, which is just astonishing and shameful. We obviously know what's happening in regards to children, as well as they're being kept in conditions that are also not decent. We have to continue to pressure this administration. We have to continue to speak up for the humanity and dignity of everyone, regardless of how they arrive at our borders. And we have to make sure that people realize that our immigration policy has often had cruelty at its heart, and in many ways, as we have exported this idea of being a beacon of hope, in many ways we can be cruel, and it is. It's necessary in many ways to continue to advocate for policies that put us in line with our ideals, because as a nation, I think we are a nation of compassion. We are people who care for one another, and we have to fight the urge to politicize everything and to not see human suffering as something that we shouldn't allow as a nation.
Right. I mean, the fact that some portion of the country tends to see refugees and asylum seekers as a threat, even given the fact that much of the US foreign policy that takes place tends to lead to destabilizing regions of the world, tends to lead to these mass migrations of refugees seeking safety, seeking a future for themselves. And just real quickly, you do talk quite a bit about what the vetting process was like for you personally. It wasn't a quick vetting process, it took several years. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, refugees are the most vetted immigrants, around the world, and especially in the United States. Vetting process for refugees takes, on average, 18 months. It's DNA tests, it's biometrics, it's bone density tests.
Wow.
It is just literally everything that you can kind of imagine. It's like massive vaccination process that you have to go through to get vaccinated for everything. It's urine test after urine test. I mean, it is truly one of the most invasive processes any human can go through, and it's lost in the political discourse because a lot of people don't understand just how rigorous it is. People will point to a child who entered this country, when they were 1 or 2, who eventually as an adult commits a crime, and they forget that they were essentially raised by our society, and there was no vetting that could have been done to stop a 2-year-old from entering this country and eventually becoming a criminal. But that's the example that they will use. They will say, look at this immigrant, this refugee that came to the country and has done this. We have to have better processes, and there's no process that can predict what a 2-year-old will grow up to be or a 5-year-old will grow up to be. And instead of taking account of them being actually our neighbor and our society, raising them and having a hand in who they ended up being, we blame the process that brought them here, the process that provided safety, and it is, a process again that is in line with international decency. I entered Kenya illegally because I was fleeing war and devastation. I eventually lived in a refugee camp for 4 years in Kenya. I can't imagine what would have happened if Kenya closed its borders and said no one is coming in. And Kenya is not the United States is not a wealthy nation like ours is. And I remember the year we came in, maybe 100,000 people arrived at those borders and were allowed to, seek refuge. I mean, and even here in the United States, if you look back at our history, from 1870 to 1924, before we started having, the kind of rigorous immigration laws that we now have, millions of people were showing up every single year. Multiple, folks from different nations around the world were coming to our borders, and people didn't have to go through vetting. They didn't have to do anything. They were coming. And that's how we got our name and our symbol of being a beacon of hope, because this was the place where people who were seeking refuge from persecution, from starvation, from all of the ills that were happening around the world at that time. This is where they would come. But I would also remind you and the viewers, we haven't always been kind to the newest immigrants, right? Even immigrants themselves weren't kind to the newest immigrants. Italian immigrants face backlash. Irish immigrants face backlash. Obviously, Jewish immigrants face backlash. We've seen what happened to Syrian immigrants. There's obviously a story with Somali immigrants when they came to this country, and it does sort of. I mean, Chinese immigrants and Japanese immigrants. It just the list goes on and on. We've certainly had extremely xenophobic laws too that were put on the books. Right. There's one that I'm trying to get rid of, which is the Alien Act. I have legislation called Neighbors, Not Aliens Act, and we're trying to get rid of that piece of legislation that's still on the books. And so it is we have. There's a duality in that, right? We have both history of being welcoming, but we also have history of being extremely xenophobic, and bigoted towards certain groups. And we, have to appeal to our better angels, because we are capable of being decent. We are capable of having compassion. We are capable of having empathy, and we are capable of welcoming new people as our neighbors.
Right. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. And what I've noticed is that typically politicians use these cultural issues, whether it be immigration or nationalistic rhetoric, in an effort to kind of distract Americans from the fact that they have nothing else to offer. So right now, I think that you're seeing this rise of nationalism in the United States and this pushback against accepting asylum seekers and refugees because of the precarious economic situation that so many people are experiencing. They're looking for a scapegoat, and you have certain politicians who provide that scapegoat. But I think that the passage of robust legislation like the budget reconciliation bill is so incredibly important, because really a lot of the societal ills that we're experiencing right now is based on the anger and frustration that Americans across the political spectrum are feeling as a result of their economic situation. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because this debate about the reconciliation bill rages on. There's a possibility that it won't even pass. And I'll get into some specifics in just a minute, but overall, what are your thoughts about how this debate is going?
Yeah, I mean, economics has everything to do with the way divisions are manipulated by politicians, right? And instead of me offering you an economic solution to the economic crisis that you and your family is experiencing, what if I just told you that there's someone else that's getting an economic opportunity, and that's who you need to fight, and not me for not fulfilling my promise and doing what I need to do on behalf of you as your legislator? And so that's really what happens in many parts of the world. That's what's happening here in our country, and it's necessary for us to fight for economic policies that are able to sustain people. When we're talking about the Build Back Better agenda, it obviously has solutions to the childcare crisis that exists in our communities. That's making it hard for so many families not to be gainfully employed without worrying about their children who's caring for them, or using their whole paycheck to essentially pay for childcare. It certainly has paid leave so that you are not at risk of losing your job if you are sick. It has all of these policies that help you care for your elderly family member or your disabled family member in the care economy. It has, policies that address the anxiety that the young people and the future generation have in regards to what kind of future they will inherit, right?
Do you feel though? I mean, it's a robust bill, certainly more robust than we've seen from corporate Democrats in recent years. So do you feel the Democratic leadership is really fighting hard enough for this? I mean, Chuck Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader, and when you compare the way he's handling unifying the caucus, the Democratic caucus, versus how Mitch McConnell was able to unify the GOP when he was the Senate Majority Leader, I mean, it's night and day, and pretty frustrating because really voters don't feel that Democrats really have an excuse right now. They have control of Congress. Yes, it's a slim majority, but they could do away with the filibuster if they really wanted to in the Senate. You have the executive branch dominated by the Democratic Party, and voters are getting pretty fed up. They're like, hey, we did what we were supposed to do. We rallied in support of the Democratic Party that campaigned on all of these promises, and now we're hearing all these excuses about a Senate parliamentarian, about Manchin and Sinema. Do you think that Democratic leadership is fighting hard enough on this issue?
I mean, what we have to remember is that we did make a promise to the American people, and they helped deliver the House, the Senate, and the White House to us. And if we don't fulfill the promises that we made to them that made that possible, we're not going to have the majority in the House and in the Senate, and we're not going to be able to get anything accomplished. The fact that we have set a strategy as the Progressive Caucus in saying we want the full agenda of the Build Back Better agenda, and Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the president himself are all walking in lockstep with us, really says that for the first time there is some unity and cohesion in trying to accomplish this agenda. Now we have some members who are and outliers actually in our caucus, both in the Senate and in the House, and I think it's time for us to get serious with them and say you have to get on board. This agenda is too important to fail to the American people.
And one final question for you, because I know you have to go, and thank you for being so generous with your time. President Joe Biden is attempting to placate, to appease the corporate Democrats in the Senate, namely Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, by lowering the price tag associated with the budget reconciliation bill to the tune of $2 trillion as opposed to $3.5 trillion. What does the Progressive Caucus propose to do if Democratic leadership does in fact move forward with cutting the price tag on that bill? Do you guys plan to continue standing your ground and vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill, or are you willing to negotiate and lower the price tag associated with the reconciliation bill?
Yeah, so the way that we ended up getting to the $3.5 trillion price tag is by looking at the priorities that we've had, and calculating how much money will go into funding each priority and for how long. And so I think that there is some room to look at the length of the priorities and how long they will be funded. I think we have been very clear that we are not willing to negotiate against ourselves. We are not leaving, families and children behind. And it's going to be really important for every single priority that we have laid out to be funded regardless of what the price tag ends up being.
Representative Omar, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for fighting for all the right causes and doing so fearlessly despite the threats against you. It's really a pleasure to see it because it's very rare to see politicians fight on behalf of the American people as opposed to American corporations. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for fighting and representing the best interests of the very people who put you in your position of power. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I always say it's easy when you are fighting for the people you love and for the policies that will uplift them. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much, and hope to speak to you again soon. All right, everyone, we're gonna take a brief break. And when we come back, we've got some news for you, including some pretty staggering numbers regarding the amount of Americans who are walking away from their jobs, even as the federally subsidized unemployment benefits have expired. We'll be right back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years,
right,
believing that it was actual berries.
Yeah, she's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you, Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you gotta force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I've seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you wanna know how we're gonna win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army. Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Let's get into some of these latest Bureau of Labor Statistic numbers, because turns out more and more Americans are quitting. The Great Resignation continues. A new report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that a whopping 4.3 million Americans decided to quit their jobs in August. And guess what? That trend continues even though the federally subsidized unemployment benefits expired more than a month ago. So what's going on here? Now, in August, some 892,000 workers quit accommodation and food services jobs, and 721,000 quit retail positions, and that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. The healthcare sector also took a hit. 534,000 US workers resigned or quit from healthcare and social assistance positions. And no, the healthcare workers didn't quit due to vaccine mandates. They quit because they're overworked, understaffed, and they want better working conditions, they want better pay. In fact, I'll get to that in just a second. But first, a few more figures for you. Meanwhile, the 7.7 million people who remain unemployed aren't, for the most part, jumping at the roughly 10.4 million job openings, leaving businesses or business after business with help wanted placards in their windows. And I'm pretty sure that you can see it if you're taking a walk in town. You'll notice those signs at windowsills, and people are like, well, what's going on? Why are people going back to work? I mean, everyone was so certain it had to do with the federally subsidized unemployment benefits, right? Everyone was so certain that it was because Americans were just lazy, they were couch potatoes, they didn't want to go back to work, and that the federal government was enabling them to do it. But it turns out that is not the case. Americans want better pay, they want better working conditions, and they need childcare, something that's offered through the budget reconciliation bill, which of course has a shaky future considering the fact that we have bought off corporate Democrats in the Senate that are standing in the way of the passage of that bill. Now, again, let me just really emphasize the point that those unemployment benefits had nothing to do with workers and their hesitation in taking these low-paying jobs. In fact, Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics says, I'm sure that some economists someday, digging through some data, will be able to prove there was some effect on the margin of the supplemental unemployment insurance, but it's really on the margins. On the top 10 list of reasons why people have been slow to get back to work, that might be number 10. Now, why are people refusing to go back to work? Why are people quitting? Well, why don't we hear from the workers themselves?
In the last year, the rate at which workers ages 30 to 45 resigned rose by over 20%. Some of the hardest hit sectors: healthcare and tech. The specific reasons, first and foremost perhaps, burnout.
Your staffing is at an all-time low. The morale is at an all-time low. It's traumatic, it's stressful. We're at a breaking point.
We don't want to do this anymore.
They just didn't care about me anymore.
I'm done. I am not working here anymore. I don't feel safe.
Workers like these are quitting their jobs at the highest rate in 20 years. Because for many of us, the pandemic has prompted a professional reassessment. So says Harvard Business School's Sidal Neely.
We cannot underestimate the extent to which people have experienced such stress, such anxiety, and a ton of burnout in the last 18, 19 months. That is also driving their interest to say, I don't want this lifestyle as it is, I want to change it.
They don't like that lifestyle, they want to change it. And remember, when everything was shut down in the beginning of the pandemic, and Americans were home. Either they were working from home or they were just home spending more time with their families. That gave them an opportunity to really reimagine what life could be like if they had a little more say, a little more power in the workplace, if they had a little more time to themselves, time for hobbies, time for cooking. I mean, think about the amount of time the average American worker puts into his or her job or several part-time jobs just to make ends meet. And how much time is really left over for that worker on any given day to manage their personal lives. I mean, there's still that component of life as well, whether it's grocery shopping, taking care of your kids and all that, or to just do something enjoyable. And think about basically having to do that day after day for pay that doesn't actually cover the costs that you need to pay for. Things like childcare, for instance. And that continues to be a huge problem. In April of 2021 alone, 64,000 female workers left the job force. And part of the reason why, or massive reason why, is because they could not afford childcare. And that's something that needs to be fixed. It's something we'll get into more detail later on in the show. But what's also fascinating to see is that workers, for the first time in literally decades, have some leverage. So when it comes to the workers who are refusing to go back to work, they have some demands. They want flexibility, they want better pay, better working conditions. But what about the workers who are still employed? Turns out that we're starting to see some organizing taking place that's actually pretty effective. And I want to give you a few examples. More than 100,000 unionized employees between Hollywood production crews, John Deere factory workers, and even Kaiser Permanente healthcare workers are threatening to strike unless they get better contracts that offer better pay, better treatment, better working conditions. And guess what? They're able to do that because for the first time in such a long time, they have the leverage to do so. So let's go into the details of that. So in a near unanimous vote, unions representing more than 24,000 Kaiser Permanente nurses and other healthcare workers in California and Oregon authorized a potential strike after contract negotiations stalled. Roughly 38,000 Kaiser workers have now authorized their union leaders to call a strike if necessary. So what they're asking for is, in my opinion, totally rational. Think about what healthcare workers have gone through during this pandemic. They want better pay. In the case of these Kaiser nurses, they're asking for a 4% increase, annual raise as a result of this new contract, right? Now, the offer was only 1% in an annual raise. And so the workers are like, nah, we're not accepting that contract. We want something better. The employers also wanted to create this two-tiered system where the current Kaiser workers would be paid better than new Kaiser workers, meaning that the new contracts wouldn't apply to new employees. And I really commend the nurses here for rejecting that because they do not want to create a two-tiered system. They want solidarity in the workplace and they demand better. So there's a possibility that tens of thousands of Kaiser nurses could strike unless these negotiations move forward in a positive way. John Deere workers, we're talking about factory workers, more than 10,000 of them could walk out after overwhelmingly voting to reject a new contract negotiated between the farm equipment manufacturer and United Auto Workers over the weekend. Now, let's get into some specifics here because they were offered a pretty significant pay raise. However, they're demanding more, and it makes a lot of sense given how much this company has made in revenue. So 90% of the union's members rejected the proposal that would provide immediate 5 to 6% raises for most workers. Workers said the pay raises were inadequate given that John Deere is expected to make nearly $6 billion, that's with a B, $6 billion in profits this year. That's not revenue, that's profits. That means after John Deere pays everyone, pays their bills, cost of operating, all that. After all of that is said and done, they make or made $6 billion in profits alone. No, you gotta give the workers more pay because you can't produce that kind of revenue, you can't produce that kind of profit without the workers. Period. And I love the fact that they're standing their ground on this issue. And then there are the 60,000 workers in the entertainment industry who are represented by IATSE. And they're demanding better working conditions. Let me give you the details on that. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees is demanding more time for meal breaks and sleep, along with better wages and an end, I love this part, to lower pay for workers who help produce streaming shows. Both sides want to avoid a strike, but would shut down the production of popular TV shows and movies, which would, of course, shut down the popular production of TV and movies. Look, again, the solidarity that's a common theme throughout the various strike threats here is really something that I'm happy to see, right? The unwillingness to create these two-tiered pay systems within these companies, I think it's incredibly important. And what's also really great to see is that for the first time in a long time in this country, we're seeing widespread support for organized labor. A Gallup poll from September shows that Americans' approval of unions is at a 60-year high, with more than 2/3 of those surveyed and 77% of Americans ages 18 to 34 voicing support for organized labor. Look, these employers thought they could just do whatever they want, create a situation where workers are desperate and they have no choice but to take any job they can and get away with it. But I guess the silver lining in this incredibly awful and tragic pandemic is that it created a situation where workers kind of woke up. They were shaken out of their complacency and they realized that they have some leverage. All they need to do is really organize and use the leverage they have to demand better working conditions and better pay. And I love to see it. And I especially love to see all of those congressional bums who called for an end, a premature end to the unemployment benefits because they thought it was making workers lazy. I'm happy to see that they're proven wrong now. But will they admit that they were wrong? No. Because of course they're paid by their corporate donors to just repeat what their corporate donors want. And that's the fact that, hey, we gotta make these workers desperate. We can't make them comfortable. We don't want to pay them more than what the unemployment benefits offer them. So just end the unemployment benefits. Let's make them so desperate that they have to take our crappy jobs. Nah, workers aren't going to stand for it, and I love to see it. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about childcare and compare the United States to other countries in that regard. We'll be right back.
Well, the Young Turks, the Rioter Show, is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of that, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, news and information channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
A haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. It was definitely the one against Fox. I told you we were coming.
When you talk about it, when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
TikTok, TikTok.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
TikTok, TikTok.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. TikTok. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. TikTok. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
That's how you knew when I smacked it back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. DJ Bart Kyle on the ones and twos. Edwin Umania managing the stage. We got a great show, don't we? We got a great crew, great show. Really looking forward to sharing more news with you. Let's talk about failing upward. You know, the antithesis of what we've all been sold in our lifetimes about how America's a meritocracy. It's all bull. Now, some of the nation's largest retailers filed for bankruptcy in 2020, which is understandable. I mean, 2020 was when the pandemic started. 2020 is when consumer spending went down considerably. People aren't going to stores, they're not purchasing items. So those bankruptcies are understandable. But when you file for bankruptcy, maybe it doesn't make any sense to also simultaneously pay your executives massive bonuses. And that's what's been going on. And I'm here to share the details about it. So a Government Accountability Office report found that about 7,300 companies filed for bankruptcies as the COVID-19 pandemic was in its first act. Of course, 70 asked courts for permission to give retention or inventive bonuses to keep leaders in their roles. And of course, judges agreed. Now listen, as we know, there was all sorts of assistance given to businesses in this country during the pandemic. That seemed to be the top priority for our congressional leaders. They wanted to ensure that they made these businesses whole with forgivable loans as long as they don't fire their employees. And there were a lot of businesses that did not go bankrupt. There were businesses that found ways to adapt to the fact that people were staying at home. But what's fascinating about this is if you're going bankrupt, it means that you are unable to pay your debts. Now, if you're an average American and you're unable to pay your debts, we know how the elite tend to think of you, right? But the elite apparently not only fail to pay their debts, when they file for bankruptcy, they turn around and pay themselves a considerable amount of money. So in 2020, amid the pandemic, 630 companies declared bankruptcy, the highest count since 2010. We had all heard about the court-approved bonuses for 5 executives at bankrupt Purdue Pharma, totaling $7.1 million last year. You couldn't miss the $16 million in bonuses Hertz paid to keep its management team in place as it drove into bankruptcy last year. So you want to retain your executives who failed the company and had to file for bankruptcy. Okay, I mean, retaining failures, I guess, is a great idea. But like paying them So like $7.1 million. It's unbelievable. The average bonus was roughly $701,000. The top bonus was $13.3 million. And that was just what came after the companies went to court looking to have their debts eliminated. So some more specific figures that I think is worth sharing with you guys. There's Hertz CEO Paul Stone, who received the $700,000. Chuck E. Cheese CEO David McClippis, he got a $1.3 million bonus. And then you have JCPenney CEO Jill Soltau, who received $4.5 million, just to name a few. I just want to ask average Americans, if you fail at your job, if you're mismanaging your job, does your boss give you a bonus for that? Do you get rewarded for failing? And I'd also love to know what happened to the workforce for these companies. I'm sure they got laid off. I'm sure their pay was cut. I'm sure their pay was awful to begin with. Now, more details in the before window, other companies shoehorned in $165 million in pre-bankruptcy bonuses, adding to the company's debts as it legally permitted. In fact, 42 of the 70 companies also gave those retention bonuses in the last 5 months of pre-bankruptcy operations. One such bonus came 2 days before declaring bankruptcy. But this is all okay, this is all legal, right? The judges approve it. And therein lies the real issue, right? When we talk about how this economic system is rigged against the ordinary worker, this is what we're talking about. When you have a system in place, a power structure in place that allows those at the very top to fail upward, to pay themselves an insane amount of money, while the very people who actually engage in the hard work necessary to generate the income, the revenue, the profits for the company get shafted. It happens time and time again. And the only thing that really changes that is focusing on the power dynamic in the workplace. I mean, union representation is at an all-time low right now, which means that workers are not organized. They don't have the ability to have a seat at the table and demand better pay, better working conditions. And so, yeah, of course, CEOs, executives, they get away with these massive bonuses even as they're failing. And how are they getting away with it? Well, attorneys interviewed by the Government Accountability Office said the Bankruptcy Abuse Act is less than effective because companies have found a way to work around it. Giving retention bonuses overall is problematic, they said, because it effectively reduces the amount of money a company could be paying toward its debt. I mean, they're deadbeats, absolute deadbeats. They don't pay their debts, they file for bankruptcy, but they simultaneously pay themselves millions of dollars. It's absolutely sick. And then you think about that in the context of a system that does not allow students to get rid of their student loan debt if they file for bankruptcy, because students are powerless. They're the little guys, who cares? The bankruptcy bill codified that. By the way, the bankruptcy bill was championed by our very own president, Joe Biden. But I'm sure if you ask him about it, he'll tell you to give him a break. But no, he doesn't deserve a break, because he's part of what has enabled this rigged economic system. And these executives should absolutely be called out for it. All right, well, let's get to childcare, since I promised that earlier. And I think this is honestly the story that should be the focus of the labor shortage and everything that we're experiencing right now in the economy. The lack of affordable and accessible childcare is holding women back from re-entering the job market. In fact, 64,000 women left the job market in April of this year alone. Now, compared to other nations in the world, childcare, the childcare system in the United States is really awful. It's far behind. I mean, when you look at other developed nations, we fall behind on education, we fall behind on healthcare. I mean, land of the free though, right? Work yourself to the bone and you get very little in return. Now, in the United States, federal, state, and local governments spend about $1,000 a year on care for low-income children ages 2 and under, and $200 on other toddlers. For children under 3, only the poorest working families qualify for subsidies, but fewer than 1 in 6 receive the help. By the way, Bill Clinton's welfare reform had quite a lot to do with that. Now, the only government support for early care comes from the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. It benefits higher earners most. The average credit is $586 and $124 for the lowest earners. Wow, whoa. I mean, let's not get crazy, that credit. And when you look at the costs of childcare, you'll understand how ridiculous that social safety net really is. Now, you go to other developed nations and they're killing it. They're killing it because they have better priorities than we have here in this country that's dominated by corporate interests. Rich countries contribute an average of $14,000 per year for a toddler's care. Wealthy countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development spend an average of 0.7% of GDP on childcare. In Europe, new parents have paid leaves of 14 months. Okay, let's stop for a second. It's not that parents can take 14 months off and not get fired. It's that parents can take 14 months off and they get paid during that time off, so they can raise their kids, so they can take care of an infant. They can recover, women can recover after giving birth. They can be there for the child in the early stages of that child's life. I mean, these are things that are already being done and they're working in other countries. And by the way, we actually have a history during FDR's administration of providing universal health care. So we know that we can do it and it can work. But of course, we have corporate interests that don't want to pay their fair share of taxes that would essentially fund federally subsidized childcare for Americans. But let me give you more details. Since American families get so little support from our federal government for childcare, there are high costs associated. The burden is on them to use their household income on childcare. The Treasury Department reported last month, for instance, that the average cost of care is roughly $10,000 a year per child and consumes about 13% of family income, nearly twice what the government considers affordable. In fact, the average family with 2 children spends on average 22% of their household income on childcare. So when you put it all in context, right? When you look at the fact that wages have remained stagnant in the United States since the 1970s, and then you look at the high cost of childcare in America, can you understand why women have decided maybe it doesn't make sense for me to go to work? Maybe I should stay home instead? And that does create a precarious, awful situation for families because they need income and it's impossible to live in a single income household. But what's the point of going to work if 100% of your paycheck is gonna go toward childcare? And at the same time, by the way, workers in these childcare centers are quitting because they're underpaid and overworked, and they're not appreciated. They make less money than public school teachers make. Now, the reconciliation bill is supposed to help provide a solution to that. I'll get to those details in a second, but let's take a good hard look at where the United States really stands or where it ranks in terms of the happiest countries in the world for 2021. The very top of that list is Finland, which, by the way, has banned privatized education and had great results. They're also incredibly supportive of families, ensuring that families can have children and they won't find themselves in economic ruin as a result of that. Then you've got Denmark, Switzerland, Iceland, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden. Oh wow, would you look at that? Top 7 happiest countries in the world, and the United States isn't in it. I wonder why. And the US spends less for childcare than any other developed country. Let's take a look at this fun chart. United States at the very end. But Norway, Iceland, Finland, Denmark, Germany, Sweden. I mean, we live in the richest country in the world. We have the resources to do it, and as I mentioned earlier, we did do this once. During World War II, when men had to go fight the war, women filled their jobs as factory workers. I mean, across a broad array of jobs. They were taking those jobs, and the government realized, hey, you know what? We have a responsibility to provide childcare as these mothers are working. And so while we hear the business community whine constantly about the labor shortage, maybe they should consider supporting the budget reconciliation bill, which offers universal pre-K, which offers federally subsidized childcare, ensuring that Americans can easily go to work without worrying about the cost of childcare. It's amazing how much that bill would positively impact the overall economy, and how the business community still fights against it because they're so short-sighted that the only thing that matters, the only priority is tax cuts. But how are you gonna make money if your workers can't show up to work because they don't know what to do with their kids? You can't have your cake and eat it too. Society is collapsing because of the sheer greed. And what's really unfortunate about it is that these short-sighted, awful people are being empowered, enabled by corporate Democrats in the Senate, people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So I'm not really interested in hearing Sinema cry about being hounded by activists who just want some answers about why she turned her backs on them. I don't really care about that. It's about time that these lawmakers actually listen to the best interests of their own constituents instead of run away from them to go back to their state for fundraisers as we're dealing with multiple crises simultaneously during a pandemic. All right, we gotta end the first hour, but when we come back, John Iadarola will join me. We'll talk a little bit about Gavin Newsom's, in my opinion, not so great climate change policies and more. Don't miss it, we'll be right back.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories. Gee, I wonder why we didn't get $15 minimum wage. Because they're all raising money from the guys who don't want to increase the minimum wage.
And we play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The Republicans say we will serve our corporate masters at all costs, including killing democracy, yet here we are. Where else do you hear that? You hear that on NBC, on ABC, on CBS? You hear it nowhere.
They don't want to talk about money in politics because it's really hard to pass judgment when your media organization is funded by fossil fuel companies.
The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma. And we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch. I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not saying how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. John, it's been a long time.
It has been. You've been gone for 6 months. We're glad to have you back.
Yeah, it's funny because I was gone for a week, but everyone, this was the first time I came back and everyone was like, it's so good to have you back. Like I was gone for a month or something, which, can you imagine being off for a month?
I have to just imagine it because since I was 14 working as a busboy, I haven't had a month off.
Right?
I don't think.
Wow.
That would be cool. We'd get bored.
No, I doubt it.
You might. I don't know.
There's so much to do.
She went away, and on the Friday edition of the Damage Report, I made some reference to Anna, and she texted me, "I'm watching," and I just thought, yeah, but why?
Okay,
Why are you
all right.
watching?
We were on a drive from Fort Lauderdale to St. Augustine,
and you pulled over to listen to the show.
We're stuck in a car, and I was like, I want to listen to John. I can do it. So it was great. I was really nice. By the way, at one point we made a stop, like a rest break, in the middle of your show, so I had to pause it, and I put my earplugs in, or not earplugs, my headphones in to listen to it as we made the stop. And Christian, my partner, my husband, I don't know why.
The love of my life, my sun, my stars, my moon.
He was like, no, I want to listen too. So yeah, it was really cute.
It was probably just because of Jason Carter, but that's nice though. That's nice.
You're crazy. Anyway, all right. Well, we've got a great show for you, and I'm actually really happy I didn't get to this in the first hour because I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. Gavin Newsom's new climate change policy. I want to give you the details on that. So, Governor Gavin Newsom of California is putting the onus on individuals to curb climate change by banning gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers, something that could have an impact on curbing climate change, but a small one compared to, banning drilling, holding fossil fuel companies accountable. Maybe there should be more of a focus on that. We just had a massive oil spill in Newport Beach, California, and Gavin Newsom had some strong words about what we need to do. But when push comes to shove, he does very little in regard to fossil fuel companies. Now, first, let me give you the details on this bill. The bill directs state regulators to stop selling gas-powered equipment that has small off-road engines by January 1st of 2024, or once the California Air Resources Board says such a law is feasible, whichever date comes later. The law also calls for new portable gas-powered generators to be zero emission by 2028, according to the Los Angeles Times. That deadline, however, could be pushed back by the state board. Now, how much of an impact is this likely to have? I'm not gonna lie, when I first read the headline, I rolled my eyes because I thought it would have absolutely no impact.
You sounded pretty like meh.
Look, I don't have a problem with this if all of the attention wasn't hyper-focused on individuals changing their behavior, right? I think that's the wrong way to go. It makes people despise Democrats because on one hand, they do that and they annoy people, right? On the other hand, they let fossil fuel companies get away with murder, literally. And I'll get to those details in a second. But to add weight to this, because again, I'm not against it. I just hate the fact that it's always focused on individuals. Gas-powered equipment with small off-road engines produce a similar amount of smog-causing pollution as light-duty passenger cars create in California. According to the Associated Press, there are more than 16.7 million gas engines in California, which tops the number of passenger cars on roads by roughly 3 million. And I was concerned about what this would mean for professional landscapers, right? And luckily they did think about that, and they're allocating $30 million to help them purchase new equipment so they can do their jobs. And I think that's really, really important. But again, there's very little focus on fossil fuel companies. And when you look at the number of permits that Gavin Newsom signed for drilling for fossil fuel companies in his short time as governor of California, you'll understand why I'm so furious about where his focus is.
Yeah, well, and look, and even if you were happy with his climate policy, you can still be mad at him. I mean,
I don't like the guy.
Look what he did back on the 8th with that bill about student financing higher education for students. Like, there's a lot of reasons to be frustrated with him. I agree with you overall about too much of the onus being put on people to deal with climate change, as well as virtually every other thing having to do with the environment. Almost all of it it's about your straws, it's about your bags and whatever, and it is about those things. But I agree we should be pressuring politicians. That said, I think this is very good. I think it does need to happen. It's 3 years in the future, which I think helps even with industry, that might rely on these pieces of equipment. And by the way, it's only even sort of 3 years in the future. So it's by 2024, or when the Air Resource Board says that it's feasible, and it can be pushed back. And there's this guy named Joe that you got to go through, and like there's so many things that are going to push it back.
Yeah.
I love the idea also that it's the one that's later of those two.
Right.
So like, if the Air Resource Board is like, oh, it's totally feasible, let's still wait a couple years.
Totally.
But it's feasible. That's the whole thing, and I get it. But also, I will say, maybe this is me justifying the fact that I like this, because we do have to start to phase these things out. We have to. It's kind of putting pressure on industry, because before it might be like, hey, could we get some electric alternatives? And then the industry might be like, well, it's really easy and we already have this thing. Like, really, why should we do this? Well, they're literally banning them from selling it. They can't. If they want to still be in business, they have to do electric alternatives, battery powered alternatives. And I think that's good. Also, it's putting some pressure on the fossil fuel industry in that they're going to lose all the business for powering those things.
I mean, there's going to be less demand.
Potentially coal producing the electricity. But anyway, we can phase that out too. It has to be a two-pronged thing. It's on the use side of electricity as well as the generation side. And you're right, we have to focus on both those things.
Yeah, again, I'm not against this, but let me give you more data. Okay, so 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions can be traced back to 100 companies, according to a 2017 Carbon Majors report by the Climate Accountability Institute. So while I agree that this effort in California could have a small impact, and you're right, it could have if it leads to less demand for fossil fuels, then you're right. It effectively does weigh into these fossil fuel companies having to essentially adapt to different renewable energy alternatives. But I'm curious how much of an effect it would have, considering the fact that California is not its own country. It's one state in the United States where where you have all sorts of red states that love to empower fossil fuel companies.
Oh yeah, no, I have no doubt that Ben Shapiro probably just bought 4 gas-powered ones and he's just running them. He's not even mowing. He's just burning the fuel. And maybe the example I'm about to make is a bad example, but to your point about it being only one state, I mean, California was more heavily regulating car engines for a long time in terms of how much pollution and smog they could produce. And that had effects on the cars that were sold everywhere, because it's a lot easier for corporations to build ones to the most restrictive standard rather than 2 different models. It's not to say that they don't, some do, but it could be that some of these companies will just find that, batteries are pretty powerful now. I have a battery powered mower and a leaf blower too, I think. Yeah, well, it's actually plug-in, but if it's more feasible in terms of the technology and you're already having to make it anyway, and people start to realize that, hey, it's kind of nice not to have to be burning gas all the time. Maybe it's quieter, all that stuff. it might have effects on all the other states too. I would be shocked if it did not.
Yeah, we'll see. One thing that I wish California lawmakers also focused on, because remember, they've banned plastic straws and plastic bags, but take a walk outside in California, especially the major metropolitan areas of California. There's trash everywhere. There are plastic bags everywhere.
Culver City overrode it and stuff.
What happened? Like, what happened? Like, is there any sanitation taking place? Like, are they? I don't know what happened, but there's garbage literally everywhere.
No, that's Ben Shapiro. He just brings a whole bunch. He just walks around throwing them.
You got Ben Shapiro on your mind.
Political speech. I mean.
Okay, I do want to just quickly touch on the whole drilling aspect of this because it is important. Because I don't want Gavin Newsom to posture as some sort of like climate warrior when in reality he gives in to his corporate donors, right? So, by the way, corporate donors pretty significant in terms of funding in this year alone, lobbying in this year alone. In the first quarter of 2021, for instance, the industry spent more than $4.3 million on lobbying in California, a significant portion of it to oppose legislation that would bolster the state's progress toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions, impose tighter regulations for industrial accidents, and ensure justice for communities most impacted by pollution and climate change. And it has an impact. The lobbying effort has appeared to derail at least one bill prominently touted by environmental justice and climate groups that would have banned fracking and other forms of oil recovery that involve injecting high pressurized water or steam into wells. That bill, called SB 467, would also mandate physical distances of 2,500 feet between oil and gas operation and places such as homes or schools, a distance based on studies showing a correlation between proximity of the operation and poor health outcome, including cancers, respiratory ailments, and low birth weight in infants. So the lobbying works in this great state of California, this alleged blue state that really looks out for the little guy. I mean, no, the corporate Democrats completely run things in this state, and they're susceptible to the same corruption and the same actions that we see with corporate Democrats in the Senate today. And then finally, Newsom loves to approve drilling permits. Newsom's record to date on oil drilling permits and the protection of public health and the environment includes approving a total of 9,728 oil drilling permits from January 1st, 2019 until October 1st of 2021. In fact, he approved 299 new drilling permits overall in the first 3 quarters of 2021. So Mr. Tough Guy, who really wants to take the fossil fuel industry to task, he's rhetorical about it. Like, he'll speak about it, but when push comes to shove, he'll sign those permits because he knows who pays his checks.
Yeah. I think the dude, when he was a kid, he got like stung by a jellyfish at the beach, and he's had a vendetta against our beaches ever since. And he won't stop until they're covered in oil.
Look, he's just
crude intentions.
He's a pretty face on corporate corruption. That's what Gavin Newsom is.
I don't think he's that pretty.
I don't either, but he seems to trigger right wingers because of his hair. I don't know. Like they're super jealous of his good looks.
He's like, if you used machine learning, it's like, give me a politician.
Totally.
Just be him.
All right, let's get to one more story before we go to our next break. So, Governor Greg Abbott, he got fooled by Lauren Windsor, who does these wonderful pieces through her organization known as The Undercurrent. She poses as supporters of right-wing politicians and then gets them to admit some pretty terrible things. And this recent incident with Governor Greg Abbott helps to dispel the notion that there is not an abortion ban in Texas. That's what we keep hearing from conservatives over and over again. There isn't an abortion ban. Abortions are still legal up to six weeks. Now, we know that it's really an abortion ban, and guess what? In this interaction with Abbott, you'll see what the real intentions are. Let's watch.
We're just wondering, like, what more can be done until Roe v. Wade is not the law anymore? Like, can you do something about like morning after pills and birth control? Because I think it is like destroying the fabric of our society and women get incentives to be promiscuous.
Yeah, I signed 2 more laws already on that. One that prohibits mail order abortion pills from being sent. The the other is maybe the most important. It's called the trigger bill. What it means is that if any other state files a lawsuit, the Supreme Court strikes down Roe versus Wade, abortion is immediately abolished in Texas before the session. So basically, we've outlawed abortion in Texas.
So basically, we've outlawed abortion in Texas. He said it. Yeah. I mean, look, we all knew it.
To be honest, I mean, that's good.
We all knew it. I mean, he'll be honest to his alleged supporters. Now, we know that Lauren Windsor is not actually his supporter. She's doing this in an effort to get some answers from him. But yeah, we all know it, right? We all know that the plan, the whole motive here is to ban abortion. So why deny it? Yeah. Like I can't stand that whole like act, that game that right wingers play on a variety of issues, right? They'll pass awful xenophobic policies, racist policies, whether it be in regard to immigration or whatnot, and then they'll turn around and be like, no, we're not racist. What? We're not racist. And in this case, they're banning abortion. Women don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks or before 6 weeks. Most women don't. So it effectively bans abortion. They know that, and the overall like intention here is to get Roe v. Wade struck down by the Supreme Court, by this very conservative Supreme Court. He said it. He's very clear about it.
Yeah, and he moved to the trigger bill to say that they're going to do that. Yeah, it's weird that when it's not a press conference, his focus wasn't on, hey, don't focus on this. We're eliminating all rape. Don't worry about rape anymore. It's weird. No, that's just what he says like in public to like distract you. But with them, he's very happy about that. Yeah, 100%. And I love that the example, so she gets him, she wants him to say, we're gonna outlaw all contraception or whatever. And so he points to the things he's already done. And he says, we're eliminating the morning after pill by mail. And I just love that worldview that holds both of those things. The most important thing is not having any abortions. Also, I do not want you to have the morning after pill, which can stop you from having to have an abortion.
Well, okay, I love that you brought that point up. That's actually our second clip of this whole interaction because Lauren Windsor poses as this conservative who's concerned about birth control allowing for women to be promiscuous. Remember, the one point that I really want to drill into everyone's heads is that this is not a pro-life stance. This is a pro-control stance. They want to control the sex lives of women. The very individuals who claim that they're in favor of small government actually really love big government when it comes to your personal lives. And nothing made that clearer than this exchange with Lauren Windsor and Greg Abbott. Let's watch.
I'm not a lawyer, but is there anything you further in saying like morning after pills and birth control is not something that will be illegal in Texas?
The way that we did it, and here's what I don't know is what further we can do. We did, I know, we outlawed the ability to get it by mail. But I don't know.
Birth control?
Yeah.
You can't all over the counter?
I don't know. That I don't know.
Maybe. Of course.
So he's receptive to it.
Yeah, look, I think that she does amazing work and she's found a lot of good stuff. I would say that that's one that didn't pan out. The goal is to get him to say that we're gonna outlaw condoms and the pill, and he's not saying that. And I think to the extent that he seems receptive, he's talking to someone who he thinks is a constituent, a supporter. I think that can explain a little bit of that. Not to say that he's not a horribly anti-woman radical. He 100% is. And banning the mail order.
Greg Abbott went to college in Austin. Lover of Texas.
Well, I loved it except for the promiscuous women.
Rights away from women.
There were so many women and they were just getting up to whatever they want. Like they'd have an idea and then they'd do it. Like they should have control of their own lives. It made me sick in grad school. No, but I don't think he's indicating that he wants to outlaw all birth control. That said, the stuff that she got in the beginning, the fact that she got him to just say, we outlawed it. We effectively outlawed it. That's great. We need that on tape. And I don't know how she does does she just literally fly from place to place every day?
No.
It's amazing. Like she never stops.
Well, that is amazing, you're right. But what I find even more amazing is that she keeps doing the same thing over again. And they never like figure out what's going on. Like,
maybe it's the subtle disguises, the hats, the glasses and stuff. It's all it takes and they don't know. It really proves that the Clark Kent thing probably would have worked. You throw in glasses, I don't know who you are. You just owned like 4 senators last week, but I guess you're a MAGA girl.
Who knows? I mean, I just don't think they pay much attention to what goes on in the media.
Well, and we're supposed to expect that they see women as individuals, distinguishable from each other. Yeah, that's unlikely.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, news you can use. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was too strong coffee? Yes, new twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
That's 300 million. That's a pretty good number. Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world. We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks has just passed another milestone. 15 billion views. Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me, or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce 1971 saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man. I can see the void.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's what we do. We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Cool news, shoptyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's fantastic. It's a story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. You might be able to find some tweets from John Iadarola during the live show when he should be interacting with me.
Yeah. For some reason, she reads tweets, she reads super chats, she's reading members' comments. It's totally cool. She's reading a novel over there.
It's literally my job to do that.
I'm producing political commentary. and I'm the bad guy.
It's a good idea to produce that political commentary vocally on the live show.
I will read as I type from now on.
But it's okay. I mean, you've got great company with Cenk Uygur doing the same.
Anna is really getting on my case right now. Sad face.
Red flag, red flag. All right. Let's talk about Kyrie Irving. He's in the news today.
I know.
All right, so vaccine holdout Kyrie Irving, who was taking plenty of heat for not getting vaccinated, is suddenly a champion for the right wing. So first, some context before we get to why the right wing finds him to be their latest culture war hero. Brooklyn Nets point guard and reported flat earther Kyrie Irving was suspended by his team Tuesday after he continued, or his continued refusal to abide by an NBA-wide COVID-19 vaccine mandate. On Tuesday morning, Irving, who is not vaccinated against the virus, was prohibited by the Brooklyn Nets from participating in all team activities. So he wants to specify why he's against getting vaccinated. He claims that he's not anti-vax, that this is really about his disgust in the fact that people are getting fired for refusing to get vaccinated. Multiple sources with direct knowledge of Kyrie Irving's decision have told The Atlantic that Irving is not anti-vaccine and that his stance is that he is upset that people are losing their jobs due to vaccine mandates. Kyrie wants to be a voice for the voiceless, one source said. So John, what are your thoughts? I don't love the fact that workers are getting fired, right? But at the same time, it's
voluntary.
Exactly. I mean, and also this is about safety in the workplace. This is a public health issue regarding a contagious virus. Now, if workers were getting fired because of a non-contagious illness, whatever, let's say workers are getting fired because they have cancer, right? Yeah, I'd be disgusted by that. That's the wrong reason to fire someone. It should be outlawed, it should be illegal, you get the point. But in this case, we're talking about a situation in which other workers could be at risk. There might be workers in a workplace that can't get the vaccine because of other complications, other health issues. It's a difficult situation because I don't like seeing people get fired. So I get where Kyrie Irving is coming from. At the same time, though, I think you have to take a step back and look at this and look at the broader picture and see it in the context that's necessary.
Yeah, look, I will say we're consistent, I think, with athletes and celebrities, taking up political causes. They get to, and we get to agree or disagree based on the merits. We never tell people to shut up and dribble or anything. Bear that in mind with the conservatives when Anna starts reading their reactions to this. Yeah, if he wants to end his career temporarily or permanently over this, he gets to do that, I guess. If he wants to be a voice for the voiceless, or I would say one category of voiceless, because of course there's more than 700,000 voiceless people who literally are voiceless. They died from COVID. Those could also use advocates, I would say. And look, I get that he wants to say that he's not anti-vax because it doesn't sound good to be anti-vax. I would say, how are we defining anti-vax? It sounds like he didn't get the vaccine.
He didn't get the vaccine.
And he really is empathizing with the anti-vax people more than those who want to save lives. So I think by some definitions, yeah, you're certainly anti-vax adjacent. I don't know if he cares or anyone cares about the label at this point compared to the other aspects of the story, but yeah, look, we're trying to stop people from dying. We don't want another winter rise in cases and deaths like we had last year. That's what we want to avoid.
Now, you're a huge proponent of incessant tweeting, especially during the live show.
I literally haven't touched it.
And there was a tweet from you this morning that I actually thought was telling, because there's a lot of manufactured chaos, I think, in the media regarding these vaccine mandates within these companies. And there's this notion that so many people are getting fired because of their refusal to get vaccinated, but the numbers are actually a lot less than the media would have you believe. You can pull that tweet up because I'm curious.
Yeah. So I think it was United Airlines had 66,000 employees, I think it was, and somewhere between 200 and 250 were fired for not complying with it, which works out to about 0.3%.
Wow, that's actually incredible, right? Because again, it's being reported as this massive effort in firing people who refuse to get vaccinated. But honestly, the majority of workers, vast majority of workers, agree to get vaccinated.
Yeah, there is disagreement, but as Senator Nina Turner and I talked about this on the show yesterday when I think it was ABC News presented it as Americans deeply polarized on vaccines. Not really, not really. There are some people who are against it. They're a very small minority. And America's kind of a crazy place. You can find 2% of the country that supports any crazy thing you can come up with. It's not to say that they don't deserve any consideration or any persuasion. I've done, I don't know, 2,000 hours trying to get through to these people the last year. We're trying to do that, but we also don't have to pretend that it's 50-50. America's just perfectly split. Some people like the vaccine, others are true patriots. That's not actually how it works out.
Yeah, you're right about that. In fact, look, this is obviously anecdotal, take it for what it's worth, but I was recently in Florida and I was actually shocked to see how many people wore masks everywhere, outdoors, indoors.
I'm surprised.
So indoors, they don't have mask mandates, but very few people indoors didn't wear masks. So I think you're right in that, I think the media's portrayal of the division in the country is a little too it's too lopsided, or we don't have 50%. Like there's definitely the majority of Americans who are like, let's just be done with this. Let's do what we need to do. And then there's a small, although very loud, group of people who have pushed back against every single aspect of this pandemic mitigation, whether it be masks or vaccinations.
Yeah, like there's a confirmation bias to it. Fox News has spent every day trying to track down literally anyone who's fighting against vaccination, against masks, against social distancing. They've been doing that since last spring, bringing on people who opened up their gyms when they weren't supposed to. How many times has CNN had on, a 60-year-old man who got vaccinated? And that was it. He wore masks and then he got vaccinated and that was his story. No, you don't have that on. It's not dramatic. So you have a dramatic overrepresentation of people not complying with these things.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get to the right wing, worshiping him now. I'm pretty sure most of them had no idea who he was in the first place, but nonetheless, Donald Trump Jr. tweets about it. Kyrie just sacrificed more than Kaepernick ever did. Kaepernick didn't get signed by the NFL because he decided to kneel during the national anthem to make a statement about unarmed black people getting killed by cops.
Yeah.
He's still not in the NFL.
Yeah, well, yeah. Also, look, I'm not a total sports expert, but I would argue that Kyrie Irving, in terms of his position, his career, financially, it's a lot easier of a sacrifice to make. Theoretically, he's going to lose a ton of money if he stays out for a long time, so it's still a financial sacrifice, but it's financially a lot easier. Also, he just chose to do it. Yeah. Colin Kaepernick got fired. He was actually blacklisted, not to mention the content of their protests. And also Kyrie Irving, like we just found out about this a day ago. We already know the long-term impact on Kaepernick's career. So look, Don Jr.'s an a-hole, he's a tool, he knows that. He knows what he's saying is nonsensical. That's his job, is to say nonsense.
And can we just, I know that the hypocrite angle is boring at this point because we all know that they're hypocrites. But you can't on one hand say, keep your politics out of entertainment and sports. We want to hear about your politics, right? Like they're always talking about how there's too much politics in like the entertainment area.
Yeah.
But then when they hear like any type of political commentary, any type of stance they agree with, they're in favor of it. Like they love it. They can't get enough of it.
They had Dean Cain on earlier this week.
I don't know who that is.
The old Superman from the 90s. They bring on James Woods, the Scott Baio. They're desperate to have celebrities that agree with them.
The Scott Baio thing cracks me up. Like he's Charles in charge. Like no one knows what that is anymore.
I vaguely remember. I do think I liked it. I wonder how it holds up. We should do a watch party.
I like the theme song.
It is pretty catchy.
It is, Charles.
It kind of makes me like his politics.
Of our days and nights. I would not want that, Charles.
And our vaccination policy.
No, don't want it. All right, here's some more.
In charge of our borders and all the flights. Do you have to wear a mask? We'll find out.
God. Candace Owens, are any one of his teammates going to take a stance against this blatant discrimination?
Again, it's discrimination. He didn't make a choice, understanding the rules and leave. He was discriminated against. And what is she strongly hinting at? There's a racial element to this.
And then we've got this GOP hopeful from Florida, Laverne Spicer, I believe her name is. She says they let Magic Johnson play basketball with full-blown HIV, but won't let Kyrie Irving play because he won't get a COVID shot. And then someone responded with, didn't know HIV could spread through the air. She responds, it can't. You might need to go back to school.
Okay, I think it's Laverne Spicer, but that is a great response.
My bad.
First of all, totally unable to recognize the sarcasm there or the point that she's confirming, but realizing that she's doing it.
How does this happen?
I don't know. There's no because it's the Charlie Kirk thing that I always talk about. Why would his tweets ever be clever or intelligent if he can get thousands of retweets without either of those things? You will only aspire to the bar you need to pass to be successful. And they've been pushed so much that the bar is buried deep underground. You can get followers just by liking this stuff. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to know what you're talking about.
Are they real though? Like, I'm really starting to question if their following is real. Or if it's just like an army of bots. Like,
I think it's a mix, but I think that there are a lot of people that love those get out of thinking free cards, get out of having to be a serious member of society cards. Just entertain yourself with hatred and fear and suspicion. That's really easy. People want easy.
I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
I mean, I don't like it either, but.
Well.
Hold on, I'm gonna tweet about that actually.
Yeah, go ahead. While John tweets, we'll go ahead and go to break.
I'm gonna do a TikTok actually.
I'll read your comments, your super chats during our social break. And we'll be right back with more news, including a Capitol rioter who decided to defend himself in court. We'll share how that played out when we come back.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive, and you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing.
And thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. I wanted to read a quick comment from one of our Twitch audience members, K-Fax the Destructor, who wrote it and said, I make $11.50 an hour. I'm a healthcare office worker. My boss has already said if they raise the minimum wage, they will eliminate my position entirely and divide my work between the remaining office workers, none of whom even make $15 an hour. Yeah, we certainly saw that happen following the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which mandated that employers must provide health care to their full-time employees. But if you write the legislation in a way that ensures that there are no loopholes, then these companies can't skirt the loopholes,
Yeah, and also at least in terms of, there's been a lot of pushback against local and state raises to the minimum wage, saying it will cut employment, and studies basically never show that that actually pans out.
Bingo.
It's not to say that no one will ever lose their job, and if you do, that's terrible for you, clearly. But that's used to stop it from happening in the first place.
Yeah, and I would call your employer's bluff, to be honest. It might be a way of basically intimidating you and intimidating workers from demanding more. Workers have the leverage right now, so use it, definitely use it. All right, let's move on to this fascinating story about a man who has a lot of self-esteem, a lot of confidence, but sometimes it doesn't work out for you. So, a Capitol rioter decided to represent himself in court. This was during a bond hearing, and it did not go so well. Turns out that lawyers go through a whole schooling and licensing process that's difficult for a reason. So you should consider that when you want to represent yourself in court. Now, Brandon Fellows, facing 1 felony charge for allegedly breaking into the US Capitol and smoking marijuana in Senator Jeff Merkley's office, was put on pretrial release until US District Judge Trevor McFadden ordered him back into custody after he left obscene voicemails for his pretrial service officer and called the officer's mother.
Oh my God.
He also missed his court-ordered mental health evaluation.
And yet, I still think I know how it would have gone. Despite missing it.
Yeah, that kind of stuff doesn't usually bode well when you're facing charges. And so he wasn't happy with how things turned out. So Fellows decided he wanted to represent himself in court, despite the judge warning him not to do it. The judge is like, look, I'm looking out for you, homie. Don't represent yourself in court. It's not gonna work out well. In fact, the judge said this: I'm at a loss as to how to advise Mr. Fellows. I've never seen a defendant take a stand in a bond review hearing, and I think there are good reasons for that. Any statements you say now could be used against you at trial. I don't know what you intend to say, and it sounds like the attorneys aren't sure either. So Fellows not only ignored the judge, but also tried to have him removed.
The judge?
Fellows
that's a
tried
power
to have
move.
The judge removed.
I like it.
No, I mean,
you walk into the courtroom, you move around the furniture, you get rid of the judge. That's what you do. Establish dominance.
How does someone build that amount of confidence in themselves?
Yeah.
How? He needs to be a life coach.
Is he
No,
white?
don't be a life coach, Fellows. Don't be a life coach. But really, I mean,
He was told by the president of the United States, you're very special people. That's a confidence booster.
Totally, totally.
The president loves him.
Whereas Joe Biden tells us, give me a break, right? Like, it's amazing. Now, Fellows told a tale like this. Now, we have the bond hearing, right? He spoke for 2 hours.
Oh my
God.
God.
During those 2 hours, he admitted to 2 more federal felonies. Let me tell you how that happened. So Fellows told a tale that went from a constitutional lawyer telling him to wrap his phone in tinfoil to a book report he wrote in high school. I mean, the guy feels so good about himself that he's like talking about his book report from high school the way Al Bundy talked about his high school football career. It's amazing.
It's inspirational.
It really is. Assistant Attorney Mona First got Fellows to admit under oath that he had climbed into the Capitol through a broken window, that he had used the previous judge's wife's contact to try to get him removed from the case, and that he had missed court-ordered mental health and drug testing appointments. And so, yeah.
Since when is being honest a bad thing in America?
He should be rewarded, John, right?
He should be rewarded. He should be a congressman, and he likely will be at some point.
That second part, I agree with. At some point, he will be.
I'm glad, for personal reasons, that this just happened. I recently watched A Few Good Men for the first time ever. And I don't want to spoil it or whatever, but it came out like 45 years ago. In the climactic scene, lawyer.
Was it about Congress? Like
no, it's about like the
title for Congress. A Few Good Men.
This is a couple.
Just a few.
It's mostly women, actually.
Yeah, it's so true.
The climax is that the lawyer gets the guy on the stand to admit that he actually did it. And it's good, it's emotional, but like, would they really do that under oath? Would you admit to a crime? Thank you, Rando, for supporting the narrative of this classic film.
Look,
I now buy it.
Okay, now let's get serious. Obviously, they wanted him to undergo a mental health evaluation because something seems off. I believe in justice. I believe that he should go through a mental health evaluation, and that should weigh into whatever his sentencing ends up being. He made awful decisions, but I do believe in fairness in our justice system. So, let's just keep all of that in mind. With that said, the judge had the last words in this case. You are charged with a federal felony. This is not a community college where you get pats on the back. You've admitted to incredible lapses of judgment here on the stand, not least of which was seeking to disqualify a New York State judge. You've engaged in a pattern of behaviors that shows contempt for the criminal justice system, and I just have no confidence that you will follow my orders if I release you. So he obviously will not be released on bond, and I think that's probably for the best. But with that said, he should go through the mental health evaluation and see what's going on here.
Totally, and there should be legal consequences. He crawled in through a window. He wasn't a tourist. He wasn't standing between the stanchions or whatever. He knew what he was doing. That said, the only small thing is, I would need more context, but I don't think necessarily trying to get the judge off the case is like a huge disqualifying thing. If you think that a judge is biased against you, sure, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can.
A lot of judges suck. And are biased.
No, you're right about that. And you can petition to have your case moved to a different court and all of that. That's not what happened here. It seems like he did it through illegal means, and that's what the problem is. But look, to his credit, he seems to have learned a lesson. He has expressed some remorse. He says, I thought it was a stupid decision. Brandon Fellows said of his decision to represent himself. He admitted that he had mistakenly prepared for an evidentiary hearing, not a bond hearing.
I think we should call that bluff and hold an evidentiary hearing. I want to see what he has for that, because apparently he's well prepared. Don't represent yourself. This ain't TV. This is literally not Married with Children, and you could go to jail.
Yeah, that's what's happening to him.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about religion in America. All right, so the Rod of Iron Ministries is surprisingly not a porno. It's an actual church that worships MAGA and assault weapons. Let me give you more details about this. So a pro-Trump religious sect that embraces AR-15s in ceremonies, the Rod of Iron Ministries, also known as the World of Peace and Unification Sanctuary, is run by Pastor Hung Jin Sean Moon, a conspiracy theorist who proclaims that his followers are at war with the deep state. Okay, so they're at war with the deep state. They're also known as the World of Peace and Unification Sanctuary. Okay.
It's an aspirational name. After you win, you get that.
Did they not like maybe hesitate a little bit with the other name that they go by, the Rod of Iron Ministries?
It's catchy. I'd wear that t-shirt. Like if you're gonna go to war with the deep state, bring a rod of iron. That's what I say.
So
it's like, I don't know if it's self-parody, if it's supposed to be a wink and a nod.
I don't know.
They're crazy. They're crazy people, fundamentally, in multiple different demonstrable aspects in this particular story.
There are some concerning aspects to this. So first off, this is happening in partnership with his brother's gun company. So it seems like this is an effort to sell guns for his brother's company. The two groups hosted their annual Freedom Festival, a 3-day event celebrating freedom, faith, and family, but that's not all they were celebrating. There also are presentations from certified NRA instructors, an AR-15 giveaway, and gun raffles and auctions with seminars on the Second Amendment and gun ownership, more guns, less crime, and the state of firearm-related legal battles across the United States. So they consider themselves a religious sect. I would like to understand whether they're tax exempt. Because this is not a church. This is not really a church.
I don't know. I love most of what they're doing. I love especially that they're doing seminars on the Second Amendment. Like it's a seminar on something that's like 12.5 words and they ignore half of them. It should be a brief seminar, honestly. Like you're only covering like 6 words at that point.
Right.
Yeah, look, again, it's crazy, and in a context where more and more elected Republicans as well as regular Republican voters are like out and out just supportive of political violence and overthrowing the US government, having a religion that's explicitly about worshiping on the one hand a gun and on the other hand a politician is scary. On the other hand, they're more honest than a lot of churches. There are churches that are perfectly fine and non-political, but there are others that they're just as political, just as biased, and in support of the same things as these. They're being honest about it. Like you can't get sort of tricked into supporting this stuff as a part of being a part of the church. It's right there in the name.
You know, it's interesting because I just remembered overhearing a conversation at the airport in Florida. This was the Fort Lauderdale airport, and there was a group of people in line behind me as I was waiting for a bagel.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and they were talking about prosperity preachers who obviously scam their own parishioners out of their hard-earned money so they can buy multiple jets. And they were actually outraged at the negative media coverage of those preachers. Like, oh, they want these religious leaders to be poor and suffering. And no, they don't need jets. They don't need, like Kenneth Copeland doesn't need his own personal airport where he can park his multiple jets. You know what I mean? Like there's a spectrum, right? Like there's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
There's like poverty, suffering, living on the streets, and then there's what Kenneth Copeland is doing, which is excess. It's conning people, it's robbing people. Yeah, I mean, it's just.
Yeah, to be clear, I do want him to be poor. I'm what they say I am.
All right,
suffering is fine. I don't wish suffering on anyone, but I want him individually to be poor. Nobody else. He'll be the only poor person in America.
He's a bad dude. He's a bad hombre. All right, well, let's take a quick look at this fun photo of these people who are doing their thing. And then finally, here's the part that actually does concern me.
Wait, hold on. You're just gonna roll right past the bullet crown?
Oh, I didn't even notice it, to be honest.
Like the full metal crown?
It's very cool.
Yeah, they look badass.
Imagine worshiping guns that much. Like I think
they're cool, but I don't worship them. I don't.
Yeah, like I don't. I'm not.
I know I'm a weird lefty in that I'm like, I kind of like guns or whatever, but I also think they should be regulated way more.
I think they should be regulated. I don't think they should be banned. I think they should be regulated. I've been clear on my stance. So it's not like I'm one of these like, extremists and wanting to do away with guns, but at the same time, like I don't understand the weird love affair / obsession with guns. Like the things that I love the most, I'm not that obsessive about.
I get it. Like I've said before, I think it's just another version of when I was a kid. I had a couple swords. I had a replica of one of the swords from Middle Earth. I wish I could fight an orc. But I can't, and I've accepted that, but a lot of Americans haven't, and they still wanna be Rambo.
I guess
they
so.
wanna be Die Hard. They wanna be all those things, and they can't move on. I'm never gonna have a wand that does the magics.
And look,
but they can't accept that.
That's fine, except they have like imaginary enemies, right? And so here's the part that concerns me. They just purchased a 130-acre plot of land in Tennessee, and they're using it as a holy retreat and training center. Why? Moon said in a recent online sermon that the Tennessee property had triggered a spiritual download in him. Jesus Christ.
That sounds dirty.
Many busloads of people are going to come to pray there, Moon said, and do ancestor liberation there. He added he planned to build a divinity school, elementary school, and MAGA politician incubator on the property. All right, well, I'm sure a lot of great things will come out of that.
That is like almost exactly the plot of Far Cry 5, the video game. The little compound he's setting up.
I was thinking the same thing.
You were?
Yeah.
Did you play 6 yet? Anyway.
Don't know what any of that is. Anyway, all right, so that does it for our stories, but we've got a wonderful post game for you, and it is Wednesday with Sean Idarola, which can only mean one thing. Yeah, it's time for ice cream.
You remembered.
Ice cream party for our members in the bonus episode, which follows immediately after this show. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. For those of you who aren't members, you can become a member by clicking on that join button if you're watching on YouTube, or by going to tyt.com/join. We love you guys. Hope you join us for the bonus episode, but if not, have a great night and we'll see you soon.